this Mishkan for ourselves. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And I have to say, with all of the terrible news unfolding around us, I feel so much today like, first of all, let's continue to extend whatever strength we can to those people who are on the front lines of this new terrible wave that's going on, and to feel for ourselves, really this thing, Ashrenu Matov Chelkenu. We are so fortunate and to have the lives that we have and to have these rich gifts in front of us and to be together, and may we all stay well. How wonderful is our portion, Matov Chelkenu. Today's Torah study is being sponsored by Bob Barkin. Bob, I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing that it's in honor of the marvelous arrival of Madame Maya Eleanor,
Uh, the world's cutest baby.
the world's cutest baby. Well, the world's cutest baby girl in this group, it'll have to be. Um,
Qualified.
yes, she's pretty extraordinary, even at 7 or 8 weeks old here. So we're delighted to share this joyful time with you and with her parents and Kathy and all the family. Parashat Shemot. I feel like we have to have like trumpet sounds to say a new book of the Torah is beginning, and how thrilling is that for us as we march on in our own lives and continue to become the people we're becoming. This text continues to open itself to us and to offer us new things to learn about ourselves and our history. So one of these days I will learn how to set this up exactly properly, but here we go. Sorry, there, okay. So this week's teaching I'm calling Mouth to Mouth, which of course it's meant to be an attempt at a reference to the way that Moses knew God. We say pe el pe, mouth to mouth. And it's rich because Moses, of course, as we know from the Torah and also from the Midrash, was one who was wounded in his mouth, or he was not completely perfect in his mouth or his speech. So the fact that he could communicate, according to the Torah at least, mouth to mouth with God, to be seen clearly by God, tells us something special was going on. So let's look together first at this passage from the latter part of Exodus. Sorry, there's something not right here. Give me 1 second, folks. Okay, I think this will work better now. Sorry, let me just open it again. I'd like to look with you at Exodus chapter 4 to begin there. So, it's really something like to reread the book of the Parsha of Exodus and be reminded, it's been a year or whatever, since Pesach at least, to be reminded of what a sweep of history goes on here. A lot happens in just a few chapters, and we're sort of almost breathless with how fast things are moving along. We begin with the echo of the end of Genesis, the names of the children of Jacob, sons, grandsons of Jacob, which are now the names of these Hebrew tribes, and they quickly descend into this terrible relationship of enslavement. They fall vulnerable to this king who doesn't know the story of Joseph, right? It's family, he says, Vayakom melech chadash asher lo yadat Yosef. He didn't know about this community and felt overwhelmed by them and afraid of them. And then out of that terrible episode of infanticide, these Hebrew baby boys being killed and the midwives rising to their heroism and all of that, comes forth baby Moses. At this part of the parasha in chapter 4, we are with Moses at the burning bush. So Moses has already grown in the palace. He's, of course, been rescued by the daughter of Pharaoh. He's grown and been raised in the palace. He's had his moment of seeing an Egyptian taskmaster brutally beat a Hebrew slave, and this sense of justice rises up in him. He kills the taskmaster, then he himself runs away because he can't quite face all that's unfolding, and he meets these Midianite maidens and their family. He marries Tzipporah, and now he's thinking he's having this pastoral, quiet life as a shepherd, and encounters this bush that is burning but never consumed. And here is his moment of theophany, his personal theophany. So he's having this interaction, speaking perhaps, mouth to mouth with God. What if I put you all like that? Okay, then I can see you. And God is saying to him, you're going now to go forth as my prophet and speak to the Pharaoh and free my people. And Moses is quite anxious about this. So that's the moment where, the camera is zooming in now. Vayomer Moshe el Adonai, Moses says to God, Bi Adoni, lo ish devarim anochi. Please, God, I'm not a person of words, ish devarim. Gam mitmol, gam mishilshom. Never in my life, and it's this lovely reference here, mitmol, gam shilshom. Mitmol, yesterday, and not the day before. Not yesterday, and not even now, since you've been talking to me. Like, even though I realize I'm in a conversation with God here, my speech is still not quite right. I had forgotten about this specific language, and when I was preparing for today and saw it again, it's the title of one of the greatest early Zionist novels, Tmol Shilshom, by S.Y. Agnon. It's a different story, but just the fact that these Israeli writers continue to point us back to the Tanakh is another thing to appreciate. Gam me'az dibercha al avdecha ki kaved pe uchaved lashon anochi. He says, even since you've been speaking to me as your servant, my speech is still kaved. It's weighty, it's heavy, it's sort of not graceful and beautiful. And, I have to say, reading this, I always look for what's in the text that just grabs me. And someone who struggles so much to try to get the words just right and always feels that I'm kind of veering off the path or I'm never going to quite get it right, I so much relate to, and I would imagine many of us do, in our desire to form our words just right, especially when we're going to speak in a way that's going to matter a whole lot to a lot of people, as Moses was being asked to do. Vayomer Adonai elav, God says back to him, Mi sam pele adam. Who put a mouth in human beings in the first place? And you read that, Mi sam pele adam, it sort of has the echo of Job in it. When you hear God speaking back to Job and saying to Job, who do you think created all of this? You think your suffering is so terrible. Let's remember what's going on here. Let's remember the bigger picture. And so God comes at Moses with this same rhetorical feeling, like, who do you think put the mouth inside of people in the first place? So sort of, who are you to go saying what's great or what's not, what's, perfect and what's not? Oh, mi asum ilem, who decides who's going to be mute or deaf or dumb? Hello, Anochi Adonai? Aren't I in charge? Aren't I God? Yeah, I am. So don't start talking to me, Moses. I love how the Tanakh paints God. In fact, I feel like I've come to love how much the Tanakh paints God in these anthropomorphic feelings. So we can relate to it, because we're based on these feelings. Ve'ata, God says, Lech va'anochi eyeh im picha, Go forward, and I will be your mouth. And what does it say in the English? I will be with you as you speak and will instruct you what to say. That's like a lot more elegant and graceful. But the Hebrew says, Ani eye im picha. I will be with your mouth. I'm going to be right in there with you. V'horeiticha asher tedaber. And I will guide you. I will instruct you in what to say. Moses is not convinced. Vayomer bi Adonai shalachna b'yad tishalach. Send someone else, please. I could do a lot of jobs, but this is probably not the best one for me. Vayichar af Adonai b'Moshe. I love this. Vayichar af Adonai. How do we translate this? The Lord became angry. But the Hebrew is suggesting this. You know how when you take a big inhalation of just incredible irritation, like that? Because this word af is nose. It's as if God is saying, let me just take a deep breath here before I totally lose my temper. Vayichar af Adonai b'Moshe. God's getting really annoyed. Vayomer halo aharon achicha. Okay, let me come at it a different way. Let's bring your brother, the Levi, ki daber yidaber hu v'gam hine hu yotze likratecha. I'm just going quickly through this. V'ra'acha v'samach belibo. Okay, God says, I see this is too much for you, so let's bring Aaron into the picture. He will be able to support you and speak. If you're not able to speak, he'll be happy to do this. What does it give us in the Hebrew? V'samach belibo. He'll be happy for this. It will make his heart rejoice, literally. V'dibarta elav v'samta et hadvarim befiv. You will speak to him and put the words, where am I? V'samta et hadvarim befiv. You'll put your words in his mouth. V'anochi eya im picha. God repeats this little beautiful phrase. I will be im picha. I will be with your mouth. V'im pihu. And with his mouth. V'horeti etchem. I will guide the two of you. Et asher ta'asun. What you should do or what you should say. V'tidaberhu lecha el ha'am. He will be your spokesman. He will be, your Jen Psaki of the moment. V'hayahu yeh lecha lefe. He will be like your mouthpiece. V'ata tiyeh lo le'elohim. And you will be in the role of God. Ata tiyeh lo le'elohim. Because he can't hear, Aaron doesn't have that ability to hear God's voice. Only Moses does. Okay, so that's the piece of Torah text that I want to kind of dig into with you. And again, this question of how is it that Moses rises to this place of leadership when he feels so ill-equipped, and especially ill-equipped to speak properly. And we hear in this all kinds of like little hyperlinks are going off for us. You can't help but read this and think of even the creation story, which all the days of creation come about by way of speech. And in our prayers, Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Speech is what brings about a world. And so it's from that vantage point, we're seeing how much Moses is struggling, as if he really understands the urgency of the moment, and he does not feel he has the equipment to go forward. Steve, I see you've got your hand up. I want to just move forward. Can you hold on to it, and we'll come back, okay? Okay. Shemot Rabbah. This is a famous midrash. I was just astonished to see that among all the things that Sefaria has translated into English, this one thing they didn't have translated. So I'm offering you my translation, hopefully clear enough, but I think you know this story already. This is the midrash, the rabbinic explanation for why Moses was kaved pei u kaved lashon. Now I can't find it. Here it is. Kaved pei u kaved lashon. Kaved pei u kaved lashon. Why did he have a speech impediment? The rabbis want to know why. And remember that in rabbinic midrash, there are no rules about chronology. You can insert characters at will. That's the fun of it. Okay, so let's remind ourselves about this famous midrash, like reading a beloved story from our past. Vayigdal hayeled, the child grew. Esrim v'arba chodesh henikatu, 24 months, as we understand Yocheved. Remember that this, according to the midrash, according to the Torah, his mother is nursing him. V'ata omer, and now you're going to say, Vayigdal hayeled ela shehaya gadel shelo kederech kol haaretz. The midrash is saying to us, you could say the child grew, but what you really want to hear in that little phrase is not just that he grew, but that he began to develop in ways that were different from the typical child. V'tiviehu levat paro, and they brought the child to the daughter of Pharaoh. Hayata bat paro menakeshet umechabeket umechabevet oto. Beautiful language here. The daughter of Pharaoh is kissing and hugging and chaviv, like treating him as her beloved. Ke'ilu hu bana, as if he were her son. V'lo hayata motziato mipalterin, I think is the word here, shel melech. They wouldn't even dare to take him out of the palace, because every time they did, everybody was so overwhelmed with how beautiful he was. I want to skip down a little bit. V'haya paro, even Pharaoh, minashko umechabko, he was hugging him and kissing him. V'hu notel kitro shel Pharaoh umesimo al rosho, and he was Pharaoh. I mean, picture this: the Pharaoh, the king of all the Egyptian, civilization, is sitting there with this baby, playing with the baby and taking the crown off his head and putting it on the baby's head. Kamosha atid la'asot lo kshehaya gadol, as if Pharaoh was saying, someday you're going to be a great king. V'kein HaKadosh Baruch Hu amar le, I'm going to skip through this. I gave some ellipsis here. So these are some wonderful quotes from other parts of the Tanakh, but I'm going to skip over them just in the name of time here. So skipping down to here, V'hayu sham yoshvin chartumei Mitzrayim. Imagine that there are these members of the royal court. V'amru mityar'in anu. This is such an interesting word. It took me an extra look to get what's being said here. Mityar'in anu mizeh shenotel kitrecha. We are, mityar'in, it's from the word yir'ah. You can see it there. I don't know if I do. No. Sorry. It won't let me highlight it, but it's this word here. We are quite fearful of this play that's going on here. Because if you keep doing this, king, if you keep playing around with this baby this way, it's not going to end well for you. The crown is ultimately going to be taken from you, and not in a very nice way. Litol malchut mimcha. Mehem omrim lehargo. So they say to the king, I think we had better kill this baby. Mehem omrim lesarfo. Let's burn him up. And now, suddenly, here's Yitro, who we know becomes extremely important to Moses, actually in the spot that we're in now. Not when he's a baby, but according to the Midrash, there he is in the palace. V'haya Yitro yoshev beinehem ve'omer lahem. Yitro is sitting among them and says to them, Hanar hazeh ein bo da'at. This baby doesn't understand anything. Let's make a test. Before we go killing him, let's stop and let's at least try a test. Ela bachanu oto. Veheviu lefanav bikara zahav v'gachelet. This is the famous part that I'm guessing that many of you know. Let's bring forth before him some gold and some burning coal. Im yoshit yado lezahav, if he reaches out his hand to the gold, yesh bo da'at v'hirgu oto. If he reaches the gold, then clearly this baby knows what's going on, and we're going to kill him. V'im yoshit yado legachelet, in bo da'at ve'en alav mishpat mavet. If he reaches his hand for the coal, it's obvious. If he reaches his hand for the coal, he doesn't know what's going on, and there's no reason to kill him. He's of no threat to you. Miyad heviu lefanav v'shalach yado likacha zahav, because what do babies do? They always reach for what's shiny and eye-catching. Uva Gavriel v'dacha et yado. The angel Gabriel comes and pushes Moses, baby Moses' hand away from the gold. V'tafas et hagachelet v'ichnis yado im hagachelet letoch piv v'nichva leshono. He picks up the coal instead, the burning coal, and brings it to his mouth, which of course is what babies often do, even I guess in this case a piece of burning coal. And from this, his mouth is maimed. His tongue is permanently injured. And begging your patience, I just had to include this little last piece here, which departs a little bit from the part about why Moses has a speech impediment, but just because of look what happens here as we honor the daughter of Pharaoh. Vatikra Shemo Moshe. She called him Moses. Mikana talamed secharan shel gomle chasidim. From this you learn about the excellent rewards for those who are loving saviors. I think that's how I translated it. Yes, loving saviors. That she comes to save this baby out of love. Afal pi sheharbe shemot, even though there were many names by which Moses would have been known, lo nikba lo shem bechol haTorah ela kamo shenikrato batya bat paro. There was no other name that stuck, only the name that he was called by this beloved surrogate mother of his. And here finally we learn her name, Batya bat Paro. Va'af hakadosh baruch hu lo karahu b'shem acher. Even God didn't call Moses by any other name in honor of Batya. Okay, so thank you for letting me dwell on that last part for a minute, even though it's a bit of a tangent. So wow, as you can see, it was really fun for me to dig into this. I hope that it was enjoyable for you too. Let me pause here. I have some commentary that I want to look at with you, but I don't know about you, but this to me is like pulling a beloved story off the shelf that I've known since young childhood, and to unpack it all over again is really a delight. Carol, and then Harriet, and Steve, I don't know if you still want to say something. Luther, Shlomo, let's go. Yeah, go. Don't forget to unmute.
Does Moshe mean baby who put coal in mouth?
No, thank you for asking. No, it would have been logical based on the connection of the midrash to what's being said here. Moshe means drawn out because he was drawn out of the water.
Oh, okay. Thank
Sorry,
you.
I should have said that. I don't know why the midrash puts these two things together in this particular spot, but yes, thank you for asking. Excellent. Harriet, go ahead.
I'm always curious about the hand of the writers. And before we got to the part about the coal and the gold, I was already wondering what, it seems like such a beautiful midrash for people with disabilities, particularly disabilities. And I wonder if, I imagine lots has been written about that, but how someone with an impediment can is already ordained to become powerful. And then the issue, so when you explain about the coal and putting it in his mouth, again, I'm curious about why the writers might want to make sure that Moses did have this impediment and could still go forward. Is there any writing on that, or?
Well, yeah, there's a little bit in what I want to show you later today, and I'm wondering if Luther Jet is going to have more to say about this in just a moment. I don't want to give it away yet, but you're very much going down the road of at least one of our commentators that it was, it was on purpose that he was quote unquote maimed. Wait, where did you go, Harriet? There you are. I'm going to stop there because it's a great question, and we're going to see more about that in just a minute.
Thank you.
Okay. Luther, Shlomo, I'm just going in the order of how I see you. Luther, Shlomo, Steve, Jerry.
Okay, well, this isn't what I was going to mention, but I actually grew up with a speech impediment. You know, and if you listen very closely to me, it's still sort of there. you know, and I'm going to be looking forward to learning whatever Rachel is going to share with us about that, because I actually have a question, because I'm drawing a blank. I know that one of the prophets gets burnt on the tongue with a coal, burning coal, and I've forgotten who it was. Was it Ezekiel?
You're above my pay grade here. I want to say it was Isaiah, but I am pulling
Okay.
that out of thin air.
Isaiah, that makes much more sense. Yeah, I think it was Isaiah. Um, that's all I had. It was just a question that popped because the way the Tanakh just weaves these themes and motifs together is always
Yes,
really interesting. So
yes, yes, yes. Um, I would have to go back and remind myself of why I think it's Isaiah, but I think that's where the connection comes in. Yeah. And Luther, how amazing that I would have never thought of you as someone with a speech impediment, and here you are. A big part of your life is as a magnificent orator and a reader of out loud spoken word. So thank you. Go ahead, Shlomo, and then Jerry.
I wanted to, you mentioned Batya, Pharaoh's daughter, and I just wanted to point out something that's always impressed me, how here is our greatest leader of all, Moshe, and how it's all women. There are no important men. There's Yocheved, his mother, Miriam, his daughter, Shifra and Puah, the two midwives,
Mm-hmm.
and Pharaoh's daughter, and Miriam, and they're all women who do whatever has to be done to keep this kid alive and for what happens to him. So, and the other thing is that I'm so impressed that our writers describe the first, what I consider either the first or the very earliest act description of civil disobedience in the hands of Shifra and Puah. That's two women who perform this civil disobedience.
For sure. I mean, yes, all these strong women are around him and making things happen. I guess I would say I think Moses, I think Aaron counts as a strong presence in the unfolding of the story. Maybe not with his birth and his initial viability, but certainly enabling him to do the job he's being called to do. He seems pretty important too. But thank you. Yes, Jerry, go ahead.
A quick comment. My audio is weird. Quick comment and then it's me. God, interesting. I think I keep losing my audio. Is that right?
Kind of just going in and out.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to back. Audio is not working.
Sorry. You want to maybe put it in the chat and then we can try to.
I'd try turning original sound on.
Or, yeah, Bob Singer is saying try turning original sound on if you don't have it. Take a.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still going in and out.
Not letting me. Zoom doesn't let me do this. Oh wait, now it's increasing. It's kind of weird. Okay, let me just try quickly. If not, I'll quit. So my comment is, it's interesting how Moses goes very quickly from I can't even speak for you, right? I can't even be your spokesman. I'm not good enough. And very quickly he's actually elevated above his older brother, right? He's acting as God to him. He's got his own spokesman, right? And it's very interesting. So I wonder if part of this is to start to elevate Moses, right? That he really is special and not just another prophet, right? He really is something unique, right? That's my question, whether that's part of this. And my question, maybe it's minor, but I didn't know Yitro was involved in this story. And it seems pretty random to me. How did Yitro get into the palace?
It's totally random.
And why is he there? Why was it important to the commentators I don't know. That's my questions.
Yeah, it's a great question. And just to be clear, the midrash that we just looked at it's not from the Torah. It's this rabbinic expansion on the Torah. So Yitro doesn't show up here. He shows up at other important moments, but he's not here at the beginning of Moses's life. There were some different commentaries from some commenting on the midrash, trying to figure this out. Like, what is Yitro doing in here, and what did you do? Just snatch him from over here and place him in there, which, yes, they do that a lot. I like um, uh, the flattering interpretation that Yitro was there to try to make sure things went well for Moses, because Yitro is generally uh, a positive influence in Moses' life and in the unfolding of the whole story. There was another commentator who said, well, wait a minute, Yitro was saying if the baby chooses the gold, then we're in trouble. So it's not really clear is the answer, but it's at least interesting, as I was going to say, never boring, if not always obvious. Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Go ahead, Kevin or Marcia. Marcia.
So the sentence that jumped out at me as we read through this was verse 13. So prior to verse 13, we get Moses' response with his speech impediment. But then verse 13 in the Hebrew says, Vayomer biyad Adonai shalach na biyad tishlach. And the translation you read said send someone else, but that's not really what it says. It says, please, my Lord, send through whomever you will send, which is pretty unclear. And I would just make the drash that at that point Moses realized that there was a good chance that he was going to ultimately be selected. I mean, he wasn't saying, I interpret it as he wasn't giving a definite no. He's saying, send whoever you will send.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you could definitely read it that way in the original Hebrew. Shalach na biyad tishalach. Biyad tishlach, excuse me. Yeah, I don't know. You mean you're saying Moses was protesting, but not so loudly?
I think he had an awareness that he may not in the end he may in the end be the one.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if the commentaries say anything about it, but as we read through it, the Hebrew caught my eye because it's
Yeah.
weird Hebrew.
Yeah, it's an uncommon
It's
turn of
vague.
phrase. Right. What do you do with that? Yeah, maybe because you're right. After that protest right there, that one that you're pointing to, there is no more protest. After that, God says, look, this is what's going to happen, and Moses doesn't, in fact, protest anymore. And I thought, Jerry, when you were starting to say before, he makes a big leap, Moses does. I thought you were going to talk about the thing that always jumps out at me, which is we go from Moses saying, I can't do this, and I'm not the one for this, and I don't even, to at the end of Exodus saying to God, not only am I in this, I want to see your face, God. You've let me see a lot of other things, but I need to know you even more clearly. And that's quite an evolution for someone who was reticent about even participating. Bob and Gil, and then let's go back to some commentary.
It just strikes me how God doesn't get much respect from our forebears. Abraham argues with him. Jacob, bargains with him, says, if you do this, I'll do this.
Mhm.
It's a real Jewish thing, really, that God's got to earn his keep. It's not just taken. And it's interesting how, God gets angry because look who I am, and you have the audacity. And I mean, I think throughout the ancestors, there's always this audacity. Who are you to question God? But they do it.
Yeah, I think there are a number of places where the characters in the Tanakh seem to just speak directly to God in a very, as you're saying, a very familiar familiar way. Listening to you, Bob, makes me think of. I was just telling somebody about this recently. I have this memory of from being a teenager. I think I was a young teen, and I think I had gone to church with a friend, I guess. And what I noticed was that in church, everyone sat politely and didn't kibitz all morning long. And I was sort of very aware of that. Like, wow, people sit very politely here. And then I went to synagogue with I think with my mom, one of my parents. I remember saying to my mom, what is it with our community? Like, why can't people stop chit-chatting during the service? See, even then I was already. And she said, at the time, she said to me, in the synagogue, we feel very comfortable here. We feel comfortable talking to God, and we don't feel like we have to stand on ceremony, which was a very diplomatic answer. I think that we can all learn to be polite and keep our mouths shut at various times. But it's just the same idea, I think, that I hear you bringing up. Like, we feel comfortable with God, and we don't feel like we have to kind of keep ourselves remote. So thank you for bringing that up. Gil, go ahead.
The last thing you said, that was the point of Reform Judaism, to get the Jews to behave.
Yes.
But anyway, going back to why I think Moses did not, when Moses has a theophany where God changes his rod into a snake and makes his hand leprous or whatever you want to call it. And then what God sees is Moses saying, I'm not so sure I want to do this. And that's when God gets really angry. And I think he doesn't protest after that, because not only did God show what power he has, he also had power to destroy you, to make Moses go away. And he had picked Moses, and Moses, this is your job. That's the end of it.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what God getting angry with you is like.
No, I can't. Well.
And so Moses got that in this. It's not described. And that's why one of the reasons he did not change his mind after this, and he went along and did it.
You're saying, back to Marcia's point, that
Yeah.
you're saying that Moses didn't continue to argue with God?
He couldn't argue anymore. He got the point when, if God got angry at you, would you continue to argue?
Yeah, I don't know. Right, hopefully not. If I was
If you have
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. So there's something that Bob said that reminded me that I wanted to just dwell on this for a moment. It's interesting, there's so much about Moses and his inability. Oh, Steve, go ahead. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, Harriet asked the basic question that I had, and that was from this perspective of, what were the writers who were writing this down at whatever time in our past history intending by, rather than having Moses be this sterling, individual who could not only, act, but had the oratory skills, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And we've had a little conversation in the chat room, and Bob Singer put forth an interesting idea, and I built on it. And just the idea that there's perhaps, why not you reach the coal and you burn your hands? I mean, that's and it drops, and instead of touching the tongue, which then adds this level of oratory difficulty to this character. And to me, maybe there's some tie-in to one has to be humble and perhaps hesitant to speak the words of God, or to convey, or to take the role of a speaker for God, or a voice of God. And maybe there's something there, if one doesn't necessarily accept all this as historical fact.
Right. No, I think it has even greater value than historical fact. Yeah. Thank you. So we're going to come there and looking at some of these commentaries in just a second. There was something else when you brought up Harriet's question. I was thinking, in the book of Leviticus, there are passages that delineate who is fit to bring a sacrifice, and if you have any kind of disability, not any kind, but the Torah does, specifically lay out, if you have this, if you're maimed in some way, you're not able to bring a sacrifice. And of course, the greatest prophet of the whole story is one who, at least according to this piece that we're looking at, is imperfect, very imperfect. It seems that the imperfection is a bigger deal to him than it is to anyone else, including to God. So that's an interesting question to unpack as well. Just wanted to say one last thing before we turn back to some of the commentaries. I was just really struck. I hadn't thought of this before, but this focus on Moses's skill as a public speaker, it really drives home how much this is now a story about a public national movement, because none of the other ancestors, did Abraham, was he a great speaker? It didn't matter. Sarah, none of them. Maybe Joseph, you could say, had to have a certain skill of public speaking and public recitation, but the rest of them, they weren't involved in a national story. They were involved in a family unfolding and a search for God in a most personal way. Thank you, Luther, for that. I thought it was Isaiah. But now, as a whole book of Exodus takes the whole thing and lifts it into this much broader, much more far-reaching unfolding. Okay, now back to our text. We don't have a lot of time left. We'll go quickly here. Okay, we looked at our midrash. So this is going to get into now a little bit, I think, of what Harriet and others were asking about the nature of having a blemish, sort of, how can you be a prophet who also has a blemish? This is from the Tur Aruch. I'm just going to, it's a long one, so I want to see if I can just go somewhat quickly here. So this is commenting on this little phrase that I was mentioning above, Gam mitmol, gam shilshom. Moses is saying to God, I wasn't good at speaking yesterday, not the day before, not since you've been trying to convince me to do this. It's never going to happen for me. This commentator says we learn that this shows that God had spent a full week trying to convince Moses to accept the mission. I can't tell you where the 7 days comes from. It's not noted, not in the Hebrew either, so don't ask me. But this commentator says this. So if we look at the pshat, the plain text, and try to understand where Moses was coming from, Moses argued that seeing that the people know that he had this speech defect since youth, they would be astounded that God hadn't fixed it, but in fact have sent forth a prophet who is disabled, who has a blemish, as the text says here. And on top of that, wouldn't Pharaoh consider it kind of an insult to have to deal with someone who suffers like this? In other words, this is the Tur Aruch saying this is what Moses was trying to say to God. First of all, the people are going to think this can't be for real, because if this God thing is really about what Moses says it is, why would God have let me continue to be a stutterer, a stammerer, something wrong with my speech, a speech impediment? And on top of that, this leader that you want me to go talk to, wouldn't he be kind of insulted to have such a low-level diplomat coming at him? Moses did not want to assume the burden of leadership. He did not pray to God to heal his speech defect. He hadn't heard of praying to God yet, so we can't blame him for that. It hadn't been invented so much yet. So he contented himself with saying that someone with a blemish such as he suffered was not likely to be the most suitable candidate for the task. He did not, God, it says, did not want to heal the speech defect precisely because he had not prayed to God to do so. He simply told him to go and fulfill his mission, and that he would come to his aid whenever it was needed, right? God says, Ani ehyeh im picha, I will be with your mouth. Whatever he would be saying to Pharaoh would come out of his mouth clear, without Pharaoh ever becoming aware of the fact that he suffered from any speech defect. So the fact that Moses has this speech defect is an issue for Moses, but it's not going to be an issue for anyone who hears him, which is so much about how, we're so aware of all of our faults, all of the ways that we are imperfect, those of us with visible or audible defects, and those of us with all of our many invisible defects. And most of the time, the outside world doesn't perceive those defects. Most of the time, the outside world experiences us in ways that we don't perceive. So in this case, the Tur Aruch is saying Moses experienced a double miracle, in that whenever he faced Pharaoh, he could speak normally without there being even a trace of his usual handicap. I just want to skip here a little bit. So, and this is where they're quoting the Midrash that we just read. Skip down. Seeing that his very speech defect, in a manner of speaking, had been his lifesaver, right? Because the thing of him putting the coal in his mouth saved his life, it would have been inappropriate to reverse this defect. It was an intrinsic part of what made him ready for this kind of leadership. Some commentators do not agree that God healed Moses' speech defect at all, even when he used to stand before Pharaoh, but that God might have done so had Moses not used it. In other words, if Moses hadn't said to God, please don't pick me because I don't really speak very well, God would have said, by the way, let me just fix up that speech defect you have before you go. But because Moses was so aware of it, God did not fix it. And the commentary is not saying this. I'm saying perhaps that's part of Moses's power. His actual disability is his power. This is just a delicious piece from Likutei Moharan, which is Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav. So he's approaching this in a most Hasidic way, which is to understand the experience of Exodus on a psycho-spiritual level that we could all enter somehow. The essence of the Egyptian exile was that the spoken word was in exile. And just have to pause here. Let me just stop the share for a second. There's a wonderful commentary that comes from a different Hasidic master, from the Sfat Emet, which I'm sure I've mentioned in this context before, where the Sfat Emet talks about the episode of Hebrew slavery in Egypt as an episode of exile. It takes I remember the first time I read it, I sort of had to say, oh, exile. Usually you think of the exile as being when our people were thrown out of our land, after the temple was destroyed the first time, the second time. That's the galut. But the Sfat Emet says, no, in fact, the episode of slavery, before they even had ever entered the land, was already a kind of exile. It was an exile from God. They were cut off, and part of the way they were cut off was by being without speech. They were muted. This is Sfat Emet gives us commentary for Shabbat Shirah, actually, when they started to sing. They overcame their exile. They found their voice. So now to go back here and see what he's saying here. The essence of the Egyptian exile, the period of slavery in Egypt, was that the spoken word was also in exile. The people, the enslaved people who were living there were in a kind of exile, and that's the reason that Moshe was, as we saw above, kaved peh, heavy of mouth, or somehow unable to speak clearly and well, by means of redemption of the aspect of mouth. We see then, and he goes on to talk about the 50 gates of understanding, which is a concept I don't know well enough to try to teach here, but we'll come back to it on Shavuot because that's what it relates to the most. Shavuot is 49 gates, 7 weeks times 7 days, counting, and the 50th is the place of ultimate redemption. Anyway, he uses as his proof text this same passage that we saw above in the Torah text. This is the aspect of who gave humanity a mouth. Mi sam pe le adam. He says here, mi daika. Yeah, in fact, who? It's completely rhetorical and saying it's God. And once we sort of surrender to that God is speaking through us, whether we're Moses or we're someone else, we can withstand whatever disabilities may be in our way, or we think are in our way. Okay. I think I'm going to skip. I'm going to go to this last one just because we're coming to the end of our time. So this is again the Tur Aruch, the same commentator we saw in our first commentary, but he's now commenting on this latter phrase that we looked at in the Torah. Vanochi eye im picha. I will be with your mouth. I will give you precise instructions about what to say to Pharaoh. And at this point, God did not say that Aaron would speak on his behalf. Aaron would only speak on Moses' behalf to the people, not to Pharaoh. We know this from verse 16. The Torah Aruch says, Vayedaberhu el ha'am. Aaron spoke to the people, to the Hebrew slaves, the Hebrew enslaved people. That would be Aaron's task to address the people, but the people would know that he was a mouthpiece, he was a spokesperson. The word neviecha means that just as a prophet is God's mouthpiece, so Aaron will now be Moses' mouthpiece. Possible that this arrangement was out of the desire to show deference to the Egyptian establishment, maybe in particular Pharaoh, who might be insulted, as we saw above, this idea that maybe the Pharaoh would be insulted if he received the word of God, not even through his prophet, but through the prophet's prophet. In spite of these considerations, in the end, Moses queried that the chances of Pharaoh paying heed to a stammerer such as he was too much to expect. But I just found this so interesting, the word neviecha being brought in here. It's not in the original Torah text. The Torah Aruch is just inserting it here. But the idea that Moses is God's Navi, and in this case, Aaron is Moses's Navi. And that the word gets delivered to the people and to Pharaoh by the proper Navi of the moment, who needs to be the speaker of the moment. In fact, it was Moses who needed to speak to Pharaoh directly. Moses, even with his speech impediment, his lack of confidence, which maybe was the source of his strength. Can you not imagine Brene Brown getting her hands wrapped around this and saying, your vulnerability is your greatest strength? Go there first. David, go ahead.
Yeah, it's brilliant, the idea that the disability is not just an impediment, but it's part of who the person is. It's in this case, Moses' strength. And even though he's self-stigmatized, he is not able to accept that Pharaoh's going to listen to him. In fact, his words are more powerful than Aaron's words. This is a wonderful midrash. Thank you for sharing this.
His words are more powerful than Aaron's words?
Right, because he doesn't think they're going to be, but because he's the real deal, whereas Aaron is just a spokesman, maybe he comes across more powerfully than Aaron would have when he talks to Pharaoh. At least that was sort of, maybe I'm putting a gloss on the last part of that midrash that you just shared with us.
Mm-hmm. No,
So, yeah, so it's sort of the power of the self-dignity, even though Moses maybe doesn't feel that way, at least at the beginning of his mission.
Thank you. Great. It's great to have you with us, David. We've been missing you. I'm just taking in Jerry here. Pharaoh was never going to be convinced by great oratory, but only by God's awesome actions, and God knew that. It is Moses, however, that is not Moses. However he speaks, that will move Pharaoh. God will do that, and important that we don't forget that. Kol hakavod. Thank you. It's only through the plagues that Pharaoh is finally convinced, not by Moses' great oratory anyway. So yeah, thank you. Some people say that the Shirah, the Song of the Sea, is Moses' song of celebration. Some people say it's Miriam's, but somehow he comes to find his voice and then to really struggle with getting to know God even more closely. Shlomo, we're going to give you the last word.
One of the characteristics which often others describe Moshe as his great humility. And we see in the book of Dvarim that Moses is really a great orator. He doesn't have any speech impediment in Dvarim. He gives great speeches in Dvarim. So I just wanted to emphasize that this may also be Moshe in his humility saying, look, I can't do this. So I just wanted to,
yes,
because Dvarim suggests that he is a great speaker.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for bringing that up. I mean, it's as if the process of leading this people through this journey helps him to refine himself or to release himself from whatever his perceived speech impediment was or other disability, so that when he comes to the end of his life, he has no problem speaking. And in fact, he in Devarim, he's constantly saying, "This is what God said. Don't forget what God said." So he's fully embraced that role of Navi. I don't know what else can we call him. I meant to put in on the source sheet. I forgot the verse from Yigdal. Lo kam Yisrael kamoshe od Navi umabit et tmunato. There never arose another in Israel another prophet, Navi umabit, the one who. This is again this thing about Moses being able to gaze upon God and also be seen by God. So thank you, Moses. Thank you, Moses. Thank you, Shlomo. Audrey, you had your hand up. Were you going to say something? No. Okay. I need to bring this to a close for today. I want to say thank you. Today's the last day that I'll be teaching for a little while at least. I was planning to leave for Israel January 1st. Apparently that's not happening, so I'm still waiting to see if there's a way to make that trip maybe later into the new year. But for now, just want to express my profound gratitude to all of you who have been tuning in and helping me to learn this text in ways I never have learned before, and for bringing your wonderful questions and insights to our ongoing journey as a people with this marvelous Torah. So everyone, please keep well.
Can I just say before we end, on behalf of everyone here and the other people that have joined, I just want to give you, Rachel, Rabbi Rachel, an immense thank you of appreciation for all the work that you've done to prepare for months now each of these weekly sessions and present the Parsha in such interesting and accessible ways for all of us. It is truly a gift that you have given to the community, and I profoundly thank you. Rabbi Leila Gall-Berner is going to join us on January 19th and teach. That was the plan, to have her fill in. She's marvelous, and I hope everyone shows up. But Rachel, I want to make sure that we find more time in the schedule for you to come too, because it's just been remarkable.
Yeah,
so
I'll
thank
definitely
you.
be back, but I'm going to take a little breather now.
So one more thing, we have a 2-week break, but I have to say, I had the pleasure of listening to David Cuny's Good to Know session that he gave on Sunday. And I was, David, as I shared with you in my message, so moved by what you had to say and the importance of Jewish literacy and the commitment that our community has to continue to make to Jewish literacy in order for our people to continue. It was profound. And if you can find 1 hour of time to listen to David's recording, you can get it on the Jewish Studies playlist. It is really worth your time. And thank you, Myrna Seidman, for being his gabbai. I really appreciate it. But it was remarkable. And thank you for sharing your family story with us, David.
You're here. Everyone, please keep well. Thank you again to Audrey, and we'll see each other probably mostly this way for the next few weeks.
Have a good, restful, wonderful sabbatical. You really deserve the rest, and I hope you can get to Israel. And enjoy Israel too.
Absolutely.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Just wonderful. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Rachel, you took a particular interest in Vayichar Af.
Yeah.
Think about it. Nechiraim are nostrils, and Vayichar is related to that. And Af is a nose.
Right.
God flared his nostrils.
Yes, that's exactly what I was saying. Like God took a big angry breath.
Good.
It was great how you described that.
Thank you, everyone. Keep well.